Good morning. It's Thursday, and we read Acts, 21, from verse 27 to the end, to 36. No. Yes, 27 through 36, but it's not the end of the chapter. It's early. Never mind. So the reading. When the 7 days were almost completed, the Jews from Asia, seeing him in the temple, stirred up the whole crowd and laid hands on him, crying out, "Men of Israel, help! This is the man who is teaching everyone everywhere against the people and the law and this place. Moreover, he even brought Greeks into the temple and has defiled this holy place." For they had previously seen Trophimus the Ephesian with him in the city, and they supposed that Paul had brought him into the temple. Then all the city was stirred up, and people ran together, and they seized Paul and dragged him out of the temple, and at once the gates were shut. And as they were seeking to kill him, word came to the tribune of the cohort that all Jerusalem was in confusion. He at once took soldiers and centurions and ran down to them. And when they saw the tribune and the soldiers, they stopped beating Paul. Then the tribune came up and arrested him and ordered him to be bound with 2 chains. He inquired who he was and what he had done. Some in the crowd were shouting one thing and some another. And as he could not learn the facts because of the uproar, he ordered him to be brought into the barracks. And when he came to the steps, he was actually carried by the soldiers because of the violence of the crowd. For the mob of the people followed, crying out, "Away with him." So Paul is arrested. The Jews all run together, and some of them say, "Oh, look at this guy. He's the one who teaches all these lawless things. He says you don't have to obey Moses, and he says, you don't have to go to the temple every year." And he says all these things, and he's even brought a Gentile into the temple, and the people are horrified, and they come running, and they're going to beat Paul. And like most mobs, there's a lot of confusion going on. People are shouting one thing and another because they don't know. Nobody has told them specifically. They just know, oh, here's a crowd of angry people. Let's join in, which is a kind of a part of the mob mentality, and we see it even in our own time. Well, so Paul is dragged out of the temple. They shut the gates quickly so that he's outside, keep him out. Well, the tribune, the leader of the Roman centurions, legion up there in the barracks, hears all this. Now, the temple is built sort of on one level, and the barracks are up on top of the hill, and there's a stairway that leads from the barracks right down into what's called the court of the Gentiles, which is more or less the public court of the temple outside of the actual temple itself. So the Romans can get down there in a flash. And this is one of the reasons why Jesus was always, when he would go to the temple and say something radical or do something violent, people would get, "Watch out, the Romans are going to come down and put an end to all this." Well, that's what the Romans do. And that's what Romans typically do. They come down, they shoot first, and then when everybody's laying there, they ask questions. So they come down there, they hear this uproar, they see Paul's in the middle of it, so they arrest Paul. And they say, "Who is this guy and what has he done?" And everybody's yelling different things. And they say, "Well, fine, we'll take him to the barracks and find out later." So they're going up the steps. But my point is that the Roman soldiers are right there all the time, keeping watch over the temple and keeping watch over Jerusalem. And if anything starts, they come running down and get right in the thick of it. So that's what they do. And they come down and they arrest Paul, and they're dragging him back up the steps, carrying him back up the steps. He's going to identify himself as a Roman citizen, and he's going to speak to the crowd. But that all comes, I guess, tomorrow. But for now, let's just think about the Roman presence in Jerusalem. We say, well, the Jews were given all kinds of special dispensations about worship, and they were. But the Romans were right there. And so even when they went into the temple, they could look up the hill and see the Romans, and so the Roman presence was very real, and they knew exactly what was going on, and they knew what they had to do, and so that's what they did. Excuse me there. So even in the midst of worship, they knew the Romans were there. They knew the Romans would come down in a flash if any trouble started, and they knew that anybody messed with, did anything out of the ordinary, they'd be arrested. So there was a lot of pressure on the Jewish authorities to make sure everyone behaved. Whether they agreed or not, you have to behave. And when Paul showed up, there were people who were willing not to behave. And so you had this riot break out. Well, that's all I've got for you this morning. But think about that, and think about crowd mentalities, and think about those Romans. They don't know what's going on, but they're going to arrest whoever's in charge of it and sort it out later. And that's what they do. So have a great Thursday, and we will see you in the morning.